Our next presentation here at the Learning Lounge, all vendors aren't created equal, choosing an A team. Here from Dial 800 is Lucio Maramba.
Good afternoon. I'm Lucio Maramba, Manager of Advanced Services at Dial 800. The DR industry has evolved considerably over the years, and for the last 16 years, I've had the privilege of growing up in our industry on the media agency side, client side, and now the vendor side. I've worn many hats in operations and advanced analytics of DR campaigns, giving me visibility into all areas of our industry, particularly regarding vendor relationships and interactions. Throughout my career, I've been involved both directly and indirectly in hiring vendors, and in my current role at Dial 800, I'm responsible for hiring call centers for many of our clients as part of our advanced services offering, which is more of a hands-on managed service model. After 16 years in DR operations, I know for certain that when all parties involved in a campaign work together to ensure their shared client success, everyone wins. As a marketer, you probably heard the saying, you only get one shot at making that first impression. I'll add to that by saying, finding the right team behind the scenes will make the difference between a successful, sustainable campaign and a costly advertising disaster. The goal of today's session is to help marketers discover the most appropriate path in seeking out and choosing their A team of vendors, and what you and your vendors can do to work towards your success by working together. Let's dive right in. When we think of client-vendor relationships, we tend to think like this. Seems simple enough. We line up our vendors in silos in their areas of expertise, give them their marching orders, and they magically make your campaign a success. Well, in reality, the most successful campaigns look like this. Not only is there two-way communication between you and the different vendor silos, but there's a constant and consistent communication between your vendors behind the scenes to keep your campaign on track and properly executed. So let's find your A team of vendors. So how do you stack the deck in your favor? Well, it starts by identifying the critical questions you must ask your vendors in each of the major supplier categories. Your DR campaign has many moving parts and need to work in concert for your success. Here are the main vendor categories. I'll be running through this fairly quickly, but don't worry, a handout with in-depth questions will be provided afterwards if you'd like that for reference. I'll take a few moments now to hit on some key overall questions that apply to all vendors across all categories. Experience. Does the vendor have demonstrable experience in your product category? Don't just ask about their clients, ask them about their vendors too. What I mean is, what vendors are integrated in their campaigns? What technologies or processes exist that will facilitate the best communication when working on your campaign? Can they cite both successful and not so successful campaigns which have helped them hone their businesses? Communication, you'll hear a lot about this today. Exactly who will be working on your campaign with you in implementation? Who's the day-to-day main contact, and how often can you expect to hear from them? Will there be regular calls or meetings? This is vital to actively monitor your campaign, even though you're relying on your vendors for their expert services. Like your in-house staff, successful vendors work best when communication flourishes, and everyone knows the expectations and the deliverables. What differentiates a vendor from their competitors? More than just price. We'll address this later. Let's break this down by category. For example, creative. Request view samples of successful DR shows that they've produced. For media buyers, how are their buyers incentivized? What is their inventory and market penetration? On the teleservice side, if you're using a call router, what call centers are currently integrated on their platform, and what are their analytical capabilities? We'll talk more about this later in an example. For call centers, beyond just asking questions of capacity, find out if they have a specialty. Inbound, outbound customer service, lead gen, hard offer, soft offer, continuity. all operators are not created equal. The skill set required to answer inbound lead gen calls, for example, is vastly different than the skill set required for a hard or soft offer sales call. Outbound and customer service calls are very different as well. If your product is targeting a specific demographic or lifestyle segment, you should probably find out the demographic of the center's operators. This could be vital to how they connect with the demographic your campaign is targeting. And like media buyers, how are the operators incentivized? Finally, fulfillment. Beyond just asking about the locations of their warehouses, what call centers and payment processors are integrated with their order platform? Remember that you're recruiting a team of vendors to create a network that must be integrated in order to give your campaign the best possible chance at success. No vendor is an island. Let's return to our overall vendor questions. What about accountability? You should seek out vendors who can not only execute their core competency well, but who can also provide you with the most accurate and timely data available. Make sure that their staff and yours knows how to analyze and interpret this data and implement the optimization plan that results. The best business strategy is always based on sound analytics, not on gut reactions. How can your vendors be of the greatest service to maximize your potential for success? If you ask any DR veteran on this show floor, the answer you'll hear most common is communication. There's that word again. Communication is vital between client and vendor. The vendor with the most engaged and involved team has the better chance of retaining the business of a client against a vendor whose team is uncommunicative. I've witnessed this countless times. Your vendors should know their strengths and their weaknesses. After all, your campaign isn't the only thing that has just one shot at making a first impression. If a vendor cannot deliver on the promises made, no one wins. This is always one of the simplest points to make, yet as a vendor, we all need to be reminded of this simple fact in the heart of pitching new business. Let's turn the spotlight around now. As a marketer, what can you do to manage your A-team of vendors? Well, the more transparent you can be with your goals and objectives to your vendors, the more productive your interaction will be. Transparency also applies to the type of data you share with your vendors to help them do their job. The reality is that some marketers do not treat their vendors like partners. They believe that if they keep their vendors on a need-to-know basis, or even in opposition to one another, that they'll somehow eke out more productivity out of them. Well, to be blunt, I think this is completely counterproductive. Whether you are the marketer or the vendor, nothing is more disappointing and unproductive than playing the vendor blame game. When something goes wrong on a campaign, problems will occur. That is a given. But if vendors are brought onto the same team and understand that the marketer is there to help them succeed, not find blame, problems get solved quicker and problems can be more easily overcome. After all, your vendors cannot make informed decisions if the marketer is not providing vital information. Given the complex nature of bringing a DR campaign to market, we've reached a point where data needs to be shared. That's the simple truth. For example, if the majority of a campaign sales activity is happening online and likely driven, or at least augmented by DRTV airings, and none of the DRTV media buyers are aware of this trend, media buying decisions can be compromised and opportunities missed in ramping up media. Seemingly poor performing DRTV media may actually be canceled, which actually may be driving significant online sales. I've seen this firsthand actually, and as a media buyer, a vendor, or a client, there's nothing more frustrating than learning this after the fact. Let's now address what's probably the biggest question, especially to your CFO: getting what you pay for. Well, let's face it, no one wants to pay more than they have to for vendor services, but pricing should not be the sole driving factor in choosing the right vendor for your campaign. Although we're all budget conscious and want to control our vendor costs as much as possible, the reality is that price matters, and price and value are not always synonymous. I'll repeat that. Price and value are not always synonymous. If you vet your vendors properly, you will get what you pay for. If you're comparing vendor services with significantly different pricing structures, regardless of the discipline, you owe it to yourself to find out exactly what the service differential will be for that higher cost, and carefully weigh the pros and cons of spending more money up front, especially if that may get you better results in the long run. Or more importantly, what your campaign may be sacrificing in potential success by going with the lower cost alternative. Here's a simple but common example. Over the years, I've witnessed clients who decided they would try and save money, for instance, on the teleservice side, by not enabling a feature like call recording. If given the choice, it would be very, very tempting for a marketer to opt out and save a few cents a minute. What could go wrong, right? But by doing that, these clients actually forfeited the ability to monitor the most important interaction of anyone's DR campaign, the interaction of your operators and your customers. This resulted in a tremendous blind spot, which these campaigns could not make up for when it came to analysis and optimization, just to save a few cents a minute up front. In hindsight, most people would call this penny wise and pound foolish. Now, that did not mean that this blind spot single-handedly torpedoed these campaigns, but it tremendously limited the client and vendor's ability to maximize a campaign's potential when it came to optimizing the call center portion of these campaigns. If these clients realized that they were sacrificing their ability to qualitatively analyze their callers and further maximize their operator selling potential, well, I know they would have opted to spend those few pennies a minute up front. As my time draws to a close, I want to leave you with a few parting thoughts. Think organically when it comes to your network of vendors. Ironically, for our industry, you simply cannot set and forget your vendors. In finding your A team of vendors, remember that you're building an ecosystem, one that thrives only if every linked vendor is doing their part and working well with others. Equally important is your management of your vendors. Be as transparent and communicative as possible. The result will be a more informed and more responsive network of vendor partners. Resist the temptation to pit your vendors against one another. Engage them as partners on the same team, your team. Competing vendors don't have to like each other to work well together while making you money. When it comes right down to it, choosing your A team of vendors is a time-consuming process. But when done deliberately, by asking the right questions, you will give your campaign the best chance for success at launch and beyond. As I mentioned earlier, there's actually a handout with detailed questions by vendor category available for your reference. If you have any questions about anything I've covered here today, I'll be available for a few questions afterwards, and I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you all very much for your time, and it was an honor to speak to you.